If you decide to continue and your feelings are hurt, I'm not taking the blame for that. Hello friends, welcome to day 7 of 12 days of la 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 la, the video in which if I kick it off singing, maybe you'll comment on hating that instead of my opinions. I know I have a lot of books behind me. I rated like 30 books 1 or 2 stars this year. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to focus on 5 in each of the categories that I've assigned to this video. Just the least favorites, like statistically lowest rated, to the most disappointing, to what I consider overhyped. But the years that I don't cover every single book that I rated 1 or 2 stars, I will get comments asking me to do so and just listing off literally every single title. So if you don't want to see this portion, you can jump to this timestamp, or if you want to give me the watch time, you can just like double speed through this. Here is every single book I rated 1 or 2 stars in 2021. A Slow Fire Burning by Paula Hawkins, Cackle by Rachel Harrison, White Magic by Alyssa Wishudo, Survive the Night by Riley Sager, Every Value Break by Peter Swanson, Only Revolutions by Mark Z. Danielewski, Anna's Secret by Blossom Turner, Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page, A History of What Comes Next by Sylvan Neuvel, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Piersig, Far from the Light of Heaven by Today Thompson, Summer Suns by Lee Mandelo, XX by Ryan Hughes, The Butterfly House by Katrine Enberg, Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Kaw. Moving on to stack number 2, This Is Where I Leave You by Jonathan Tropper, Never Have I Ever by Jocelyn Jackson, A Psalm of Storms and Silence by Roseanne A. Brown, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He, The Love Curse of Melody McIntyre by Robin Talley, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig, and then a couple that I don't have or can't find include Etherbound by E.K. Johnston, don't know where I put that, and Switch by A.S. King, also don't know where it went. And that's my list. 2 things to note right off the bat. I don't consider all of these books on the same level. Some of them were actually 2.5 stars, but like anything under a 3 pretty much is here. The other thing, what was the other thing? Oh, these aren't going to be the only books that I talk about in this video, because most disappointing and most overhyped are actually not like my lowest rated books. All of those ones are 3 stars. But factually, my 5 lowest rated reads of the entire year, in my actual number 5 position, I think is going to be the most shocking of the list. That's Hopeless by Colleen Hoover. And it's funny because this just like really, it's just a perfect representation of my channel and my reading realizations, because this was in my favorites of the year list in 2014. This book I actually rated a 2 or a 1.75, and the other 4 were 1 stars, so I didn't actually have that many 1 stars this year. But I had to include one book that wasn't just a 1 star, and I chose this one because it's a bad book. I'm past the point in my YouTube life where I feel the need to give a disclaimer about literally anything. Like, I don't care, because I used to love this book, so like former me wouldn't take offense to me saying that this is one of the worst books ever. I explored it in this video where I made a big mistake and decided to reread my favorite books from 2014, because 2 of them ended up being like 2 stars. The thing with this is the issues that I have with the plot, I had with the plot in 2014. Technically back then I gave this 4 stars, but I had not read enough 5 stars to include only 5 stars in my favorites video, so I had to include a 4 star. Much like in this one, I don't have enough 1 stars, so this one as a, okay, anyway, this is what happens when I don't have a plan to my video and what I want to say. I had issues with the plot back then, the relationship. This is about 2 characters falling in love with each other. The dialogue is terrible. The twists are distasteful, and the writing's just not good. But what I was looking for at that time was a good twist. Now I get that from thrillers, and this has interesting twists. It has surprising moments, but they're not good upon reflection. This can be summed up by cringy, manipulative characters who are going through hard stuff, but didn't need a book about them. In my number 4 spot is a book that when I was reading it, I said this probably won't end up in my least favorites of the year because I don't feel super passionate about it. I just think it's terrible. But look, we're here. Never Have I Ever by Jocelyn Jackson. This is one of the worst, in the top 3 probably, thrillers I've ever read. It's about a game of Never Have I Ever that promises to get darker. The game gets more deadly as the book goes on, which is not true. The opening scene and the kickoff and the game itself is extremely distasteful, yet again. And then it just devolves into like neighborhood ladies who don't like each other and are trying to like steal each other's friends and blackmail each other. And it's not good. The diabolical villain is a complete joke. The twists were gross, gratuitous, and not well crafted. I'm sorry to this book. In the number 3 position is a book I can't find, Etherbound by E.K. Johnston. I think somebody snuck into my house, recycled it for me, can't find it. Maybe they're trying to save me from ever looking at it again. This book is about space, but it makes no sense. And it's like, you have a girl, I love the concept of, okay, I read it for 3rd time's a charm. It was my 3rd time reading the author. The 3rd time was not, in fact, the charm. But I thought, because we were talking about autonomy and a society in which people don't really make their own decisions, I love following somebody who is getting control of their life and, you know, fighting expectations and challenging their own fate. But it felt more like a book pitch than an actual novel. Nothing was explained. Nothing made any sense. It was poorly crafted. The, again, distasteful direction that the book went, I think, conflicted with the entire goal of what I thought the book was trying to say. And everything really just happened way too fast. We have a girl and we have this entire like world building we have to do in the first 50 pages. And then she goes somewhere else to do something else. And we have another whole world building we have to do of her traveling to this new place. This book is only like 270 pages or something, and it just tried to do too much too fast. It was not a good time. I think this is the number 2 spot, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. All of these books I read for a video. This one was for this one. I shouldn't have done it. I recognize that. But here's the thing, if I only ever read books that I thought I was gonna love, I wouldn't be having as much fun. So this is a book about something. It's a philosophy book about value systems and priorities and just like living your best life, reaching a greater consciousness. But it was tedious, it was dry, it was challenging to follow what he was talking about. It's just all over the place. A very messy book, which makes sense for when in his life he wrote it. And I'm not discounting, you know, the grand ideas that he believes that he has and has impacted many, many middle-aged men, but I found it very heavy-handed and self-obsessive and what I consider a poor attempt at self-reflection. Book number 1. Only Revolutions by Mark Z. Danielewski. The only author in history to end up in my worst books of the year video and my best books of the year video. I read this here. I read a lot of bad books here. Okay, the actual disclaimer is these aren't bad books. They were bad for me. This was a lengthy poem that made no sense and followed no rules except every page had to have 180 words on it and each story had to be 180 pages. And I can't tell you the plot because I don't know what it is. I can't tell you what he was trying to do with it because I don't think he was trying to do anything. Swoon and Drool, Oh Butter Girl haunts my dreams. Let's chalk it up to being a road trip book. And I don't like road trip books. I never want to think about this again. Those are my 5 least favorite books of the year. If you loved these books, I am happy for you. Like, I am jealous that you enjoyed a book that I couldn't. You are at a higher level of intellect than I because I could not grasp why these books were written. I think writing is hard. I think writing is impressive. I think anybody who puts their words down in a book takes time and effort, and I'm proud of anybody who does that. Anytime I should talk a book, someone's like, could you do better? And I'm like, no, I literally couldn't. That's why I don't try to write books. I just give stupid opinions on the internet, and I don't matter. Moving on though to category number 2 is my most disappointing books of the year. So actually a lot of these were 3-star reads, but if I went into them thinking they were going to be new favorite books of all time, then they are naturally the most disappointing by the end. I'm not actually going to put these in any sort of order. I don't want to rank them. I'm just going to talk about each one. Survive the Night by Riley Sager, I've seen on a lot of people's lists. There is a live show. I picked this for my book club. I'm so sorry I made so many of you read this. It's another road trip book, so my bad. But I love most Riley Sagers. This was set up for me to like because it's set in the 90s. It follows a girl who loves movies, horror. I love a close proximity story. She thinks she's in the car with a serial killer, and they drive and they experience things. And I think if this book had 2 more years put into it, it could have been something incredible. But it was cheap twists. It was one of those, like, I'm literally lying to the reader and then just changing the plot later kind of situations that I don't love. There's a specific trope in here that I absolutely hate. When a villain relies on a certain thing, it just really cheapens the experience for me. So that's number 1. Number 2 I just have to include because I said this was my most anticipated book of the entire year. I said it many times, and that's All's Well by Mona Awad. I've always given her 5 stars. And from this, I wanted the feeling that Bunny gave me, which was feeling disoriented as the reader, not understanding where anything was going, and just feeling very on edge. And it's a good book. I think it has good things to say. I gave it a 3. I think it's fine. I understand the people who absolutely love this. Again, picked it for my book club, had a conversation here. This gave me what I wanted as far as conversations. It's inspired by Shakespeare. There's acting. It's about chronic pain. It's about expectations of women. But the plot itself just didn't go as dark and wild as I expected it to. So it was interesting, but not, you know, my new favorite thing. The third one on my list is yet again a book club pick. I didn't select this one. We did a series of polls, and the last book club read of the year was selected by book club members. The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I thought it could be a winner. The cover is beautiful. I haven't loved Gothic stories in the past, but I thought if there's going to be one that I love, like, let this be it, because it promised a little bit of weirdness. And it did get weird, but in a way, a lot of us in the live show seemed not to love the direction that it went in. It's got a classic spooky manner, a new marriage of convenience, a woman discovering something about her husband. Again, it was a 3-star. There are super interesting scenes in like surgical activity, but like the spookiness was just a very different vibe than so many of us were expecting it to go. Again, great conversations and topics. I think when I think about my most disappointing reads, it's ones that I could have seen myself loving because it did so many great things, but then the plot just didn't match everything else that I loved about it. The next on my list is in a similar vein because it's a Gothic story. I think maybe I have to take a step away from Gothic stories. I've never loved one. And one of the top ones recommended of all time is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And so I thought if there's going to be a winner, it's going to be this one. Again, we've got a big manor, a new marriage, unsettling vibes, and like there's an interesting twist. It was a 3-star, but it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough going on. And I think the time that this came out, like, I get what it did. I get all of the books now that like were inspired by this, and it obviously has its place in literature and I respect that. But I don't think I really get the obsessive love of this one. Maybe this should have been in my 5 overhyped. But it feels weird to call a classic overhyped. We're gonna move on to the last one. The other ones I purposely was like, you can't put YA on this list of most disappointing because it's not your age range. It's not for you. So I wanted to pick specific things that I thought would be for me, but I couldn't help but include one YA in here, and it's The Project by Courtney Summers, just because I love Courtney Summers. I've loved previous things from her, and prior to this, I thought I could love a cult story. In my mind, I like cult stories, but I've never actually rated one very high. So this was a 3-star. You could talk me down to a 2 point something. It's about sisters and surviving a cult, which is like an important topic. And I think with all of the books here, the conversations trying to be had take a lot of skill and research, and that's great. But I just found this ultimately dull and confusing. The multiple POVs, I would forget halfway through a chapter whose mind I was in. I think they were too similar in a lot of ways, and I just didn't get the impact that I was expecting. So it has to be on my disappointing list. Then we have my last category, which is overhyped, and this is again a factual one. This is less opinion based and more like numbers. The number of readers, the average rating, and me not matching up with that. I wish I had loved these 5 books, because the people who love them, I don't understand these people. And I wish I did. This is a mix of 2 and 3 stars. Some I've already shown, some I haven't. These are not the worst books I've ever read. So do not go into this section thinking that I'm trashing these books, because they, I think, are fine, probably. But seeing people freak out about them and say that they're their favorite books of all time is confusing to me. If you decide to continue and your feelings are hurt, I'm not taking the blame for that. You can leave. You could click out. You could not watch. So let's go with my most controversial one right off the bat and just get it out of the way. Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I don't get it. I understand why a lot of people picked this up. It's a story that's been told a lot, and for me in my reading, I pick up a lot of the same stories as well that I know we're probably going to have the same conversations and accomplish the same thing, because I enjoy those conversations. But when I look at a book like this that I feel like once I've read this discussion, I have no interest in reading it again. So like from the very first page, I feel like you know exactly every beat that this book is going to hit, and it's going to do exactly what you expect it to, and it's going to say all the things that you expect it to, then that's fine. But if you've read it 10 times, like, I don't know why you want to read this again. And I feel like this is a trend for like celebrity book clubs to constantly be picking up books that say the same thing at the end of it. I think there's absolutely a need to read books about characters who are facing adversity and who are going through tough things, who are persevering. But if you want to read that, I just think there are so many books that accomplish it better and don't have such an inconsistent main character and confusing character building. I found this to be a really weird mix of literary vibes, romance vibes, crime vibes. I didn't understand the point of so many different storylines. I didn't like how a lot of things kind of wrapped up and were predictable. This is about a girl surviving, but also murder. And I found that the 2 segments felt like they were written by completely different people at completely different times in their writing journey. Some of it felt very well done, and some of it felt very amateur, and not in like the character's perspective, but how just the writing was actually done. I felt very hit over the head with the moral of the story, and I just don't think I get the obsessive love of this one. I think it's a fine story. I see why people could like it and choose to read it, but like the oh my god, this is my favorite book of all time people, I don't know that I understand them. Next up is The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. So many people told me that I should pick this for the book club, that it's going to be one of my favorite books of all time, that they couldn't wait for me to read it, and then I read it in this video, and I just thought it was fine, and a story that I have read quite a few times before, and therefore something that I probably could have enjoyed like in my teen years when I was reading a lot of stuff like this. This is very reminiscent of Stephen King, and specifically a couple of his books. It's even overwritten in the same style that like this book is way too long to accomplish the story it's trying to tell. It's about a guy moving to a new place with his family, and they encounter some strangeness, and there's like interesting conversations about dark magic and good versus evil and like reality and dimensions. But the book just went on and on and on and on, and I feel like the chapters are so short, and I feel like you get the gist of what the book's trying to say. You get how the character's being built, you understand the goal with this chapter, but then like you have to read 100 more of really similar scenes that don't give you more of the dynamics, more of the characters, any more questions. It just goes off on so many tangents. The thing about my list of 5 here, which I already said about this one, and I'm saying about this one, is that you could take exactly what I just said and apply it to one of my favorite books. A book that is trying too hard, that goes off on tangents, that goes on for so long for no reason. Respect the readers who love it, don't understand them. I guess I'll go to another horror book, because The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix started off really well for me and I thought I was gonna love it. And by like a third of the way in, I had had enough. And I don't understand how this won the Goodreads Choice Horror Awards, because you'll look at this and it being in my overhyped, a lot of people will say like this isn't overhyped, because a lot of BookTube does not like this. And this is in, I feel like quite a few people's will be in their least favorites of the year video. So how can it be overhyped? So this one especially is just a general, the world loving this book can't really grasp it. The concept is interesting. I love the idea of final girls. I love the idea of a group of women coming together. I love survival stories. I love a slasher. But this again was character building that I didn't fully grasp. I don't think good evidence was given for why the characters were acting the way they were acting. I don't think it was consistent. As someone who loves an over-the-top thriller, this was too over-the-top for me. It was the same activity over and over and over again, and it was exhausting to read. I don't love the way Grady Hendrix builds his characters and distinguishes them from one another. He constantly has groups of women as his cast, and I feel like once you put the book down, it's impossible to remember who each character was, what they were going through, how they were feeling, and their relationships with one another. A lot of things just fall to the wayside, and I feel like a lot of time is wasted, especially in this book. Next up, as the sun comes out and completely blinds me, let's talk about The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I don't remember what I rated this, but it must have been a 3 because I didn't have it in my stack of 1s and 2s. So for me, this was fine. But if you're gonna write a book about like secret society and dark magic and a competition, I want to read about dark magic, a competition, and a secret society. I don't feel like I did. It's a character-led story, typically love, but like I was just reading about how these characters were looking at each other all the time and describing each other. Every time someone would walk in the room, it would be like, oh, this is the most beautiful woman alive. This is the most suspicious, mysterious person I've ever seen. And I had had enough of the character building and wanted some plot. I got one little moment of an action scene, and then I felt like the book was constantly building to an action scene that never happened. I wanted a bigger explanation of the magic system, of the society. I think it was fascinating. I gave it 3 stars. I'm interested to see upon edits and as this series continues, like what it's going to do, because I think these characters are super distinct because they were written so thoroughly, but there were too many buildups that didn't lead to anything. There were too many twists that didn't fully meet their potential. And I love seeing people support this book and it getting attention and it getting like more opportunity to become something bigger, but the absolute desperate love that I've seen for this is not something I get. And lastly, if my other ones weren't controversial, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, I'm so sorry! Again, let me list a bunch of things that you could also say about my favorite book. So can I explain totally why I don't love these books? No, because this is a plotless book that is full vibes, vibes only. She just wanted to write beautiful sentences for 500 pages. Don't ask me the plot of this because I don't know. There's story after story after story after story, and I've heard people say that they love the writing, and I've heard people say that they think the pace is so interesting and they love the whole concept of that your story is never over and it's about a guy who finds a book about his own life, which is something that I've loved in other books, but I just never felt rooted in anything. I never felt like I fully understood the purpose of the book. Like, you can tell me the purpose of the book, but I didn't feel it while I was reading. I didn't like so many of the stories that we were reading, and I wanted to get back to the other thing, but I was constantly taken into different moments. It was so desperately meandering and impossible for me to follow, which people have said about my favorite books. So, do I fully understand why I didn't love this? No. Do I understand the people who do? No. The writing is beautiful. It feels like a big poem, but that's not enough to make up for not any clarity on how I'm supposed to feel about the actual story. And that's it. Sound off in the comments below. I can take it. I'm truly never mad about reading a book I don't like, because it just gives me more to learn about my own reading taste. And if I knew exactly what I loved and every single book I picked up I loved, I don't actually think that would be the most fun experience. I think it's interesting when we all have contrasting opinions and I get to try to figure out other people's reading taste. And sometimes I just can't, and that's okay. So I will see you later. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.